Póngase abusado, ya los tiempos han cambiado. Usted está muy agüitado y está usted atravesado. Antes se bailaba el swing, boogie woogie jitterbug, pero eso ya torció y esto es lo que sucedió. Los chucos suaves bailan rumba, bailan la rumba y le zumba, bailan guaracha sabrosón, el botecito y el danzón. Los chucos suaves bailan rumba, bailan la rumba y le zumba, bailan guaracha sabrosón, el botecito y el danzón. Los chucos suaves bailan rumba, bailan la rumba y le zumba, bailan guaracha sabrosón, el botecito y el danzón. Esa buena jaina pues, vamos a guarachar pues, carnala. Nel, que swing, Nel, eso del swing ya chale, ve. Por derecho ya chale el swing esa. Acá la buena rumba, ve. A mover muy aquella, acá la buena cadera, ve. Sábado en la noche yo me voy a borrotear con mi linda pachucona, las caderas a menear. Ella le hace muy de aquella cuando empieza a guarachar, y al compás de los timbales yo me siento petatear. Los chucos suaves bailan rumba, bailan la rumba y les zumba, bailan guaracha sabrosón, el botecito y el danzón. Los chucos suaves bailan rumba, bailan la rumba y les zumba, bailan guaracha sabrosón, el botecito y el danzón.
Well, now that I have your attention, first of all, I'd like to thank La Chica Boom for her performance today. So let's talk about what we just saw. The self-proclaimed Chicana Marimacha mistress was born and raised in Texas and has been performing for almost a decade. She describes herself as having dual and intertwined missions, claiming that she organizes with communities of color to destabilize white heteropatriarchy by day, and by night she seduces audiences with her witty drag performance. So the question I'm interested in exploring is, what is transgressive about burlesque performances by queer women of color? While there is not a single cohesive group of queer women of color, nor is there a particular content they exhibit or form they employ, La Chica Boom's work illustrates the fertility of burlesque as a platform for performing interventions on several fronts. First of all, her presence on stage raises questions about the lack of representation of queer women of color in the media. Secondly, her performance is notable in response to the omission of women of color in records of historical burlesque and from current scholarship on the contemporary movement. Thirdly, she interrogates race in ways that are lacking in feminist claims to neo-burlesque, raising essential questions about identity and the interconnected nature of oppression. La Chica Boom is one artist who infuses her work with a critical awareness that is not seen in the mainstream. This is not to say that mainstream performers are lacking, but they have different means for different ends. Using props and layered symbolisms, she brings to the stage and contests various aspects of her identity, including sexuality, gender, and ethnic culture. From the luchador mask to the piñata, the crop, and the latex glove, La Chica Boom's visual content is saturated with cultural and political overtones. Viewers interact with her work differently depending on their relationships to the tropes she contests, but it is La Chica Boom's intersectional identity that enables her to pull together multiple histories, simultaneously speaking the language of various marginalized communities. To understand the scope of her work, we'll have to go to the root of this art form in the United States. The term burlesque literally means to mock, critique, or parody. And scholars use this image to mark the arrival of the so-called mother of burlesque to the United States, Lydia Thompson, who was known for her body and satirical acts that were critical of society at the time. This image is actually a great visualization for the burlesque movement today. While dancers make claims to a lineage of female empowerment dating back to Thompson, there's a serious gap in their understanding of racism and how this limits their claims to burlesque as liberating for women. Although this image appears so often, scholars never mention the character in blackface and rarely address burlesque's entangled history with minstrelsy. Minstrel shows are an entertainment form from the mid-19th century wherein actors would paint their faces and perform caricatures of African Americans. We can see an example here from this advertisement for a burlesque show around the turn of the century. And this is an image from a musical called Bombo. And we can see here that minstrelsy were both popular during the time and were often billed alongside burlesque shows. So to skip ahead a few decades to the neo-burlesque movement today, we can see that mainstream burlesque performers favor classical pieces that focus on the glamorous and opulent vintage aesthetic borrowed from artists from the golden era. Also drawing from early burlesque, white performers dressing as people from cultures other than their own is rampant in the contemporary scene. These images were taken during my field research last summer and represent some of the more popular forms of what scholar Sandra Ibarra calls neo-minstrelsy. Because there are such limited representations of Latinas, and when they do appear, it's only through the typecast images of long-haired, sultry sex pots, challenging these stereotypes and by creating alternatives is part of the vitality of La Chica Boom's work. She has a perspective and awareness that allows her to question power in ways that mainstream burlesque habitually avoids. And she's not alone. There are other performers who, aware of the complicated power dynamics that are conjured when they take the stage, reclaim burlesque as an empowering space. These images, for example, are taken from a show by Brown Girls Burlesque, an all-women of color troupe based in New York City. So taking a look at today's performance, La Chica Boom makes several interventions in performing identities. Her luchador mask takes seemingly contrasting elements and brings them together in ways that cause a disruption of gender binaries. At once hyper-feminine with her fishnets, corset, pasties, and black stilettos, La Chica Boom's head is covered in the ultimate symbol of machismo, the luchador mask. More than claiming a masculine identity, she juxtaposes visual symbols that position her character as at once both genders and neither wholly either gender. The mask is not only a representation of this male-dominated sport, but it also conceals La Chica Boom's face, depriving the viewer of the ability to read race through her skin or facial features. This is yet another way that she claims agency in her own cultural production. Up to the point that she makes the Carmen Miranda shoulder shimmy, La Chica Boom actually invites her audience to indulge in sexual and cultural fantasies as they project their desires onto her body. She calls on signifiers that communicate her womanhood via her Latinidad, represented by the music, the mask, and her dance moves. This moment of her performance reveals her awareness of the viewer's expectations of her body, but it is her complication of the typecast Latina where she asserts its fallacy. After her victory over the Cape, La Chica Boom takes a turn toward the absurd. With crop in hand, crouched in battle stance, her gestures are not congruent with the typical depictions of the hypersexualized Latina body. She complicates desire and sexuality yet again when she removes her blue satin glove to reveal the latex glove underneath, signaling not only sensuality but the raw sexual act. She proceeds to indulge in sensual acts with no less than a donkey piñata, iconic in the lexicon of Mexican popular culture. The piñata, usually known as a party game for young children, is recontextualized here as an object of sexual desire. In this way, La Chica Boom manipulates materials and iconography in order to disrupt illusions that she performs for the individual spectator. Her intimacy with the piñata interrupts the viewer's perceived sense of power, as they would otherwise comfortably and passively consume her through their gaze. Provocative, direct, and hilarious, La Chica Boom's dominatrix of the barrio is an apt example of the efficacy of burlesque as a discursive tool for engaging dialogues of sexuality, race, class, gender, and their intersections. La Chica Boom uses the stage as a forum to incite dialogues about the politics of the body and categories of identity as she reinterprets symbols in order to redefine them. In spite of silencing from the mainstream burlesque and of queer women of color from the media, this act of speaking out and owning her voice is an act of resistance and survival. Using humor, sensuality, sass, and political savvy, we could say that La Chica Boom truly puts the titties in identities. Thank you.